I the asshole for yelling at my mother-in-law for associating my baby's bad genes on me? So I, female 25, recently gave birth to my daughter. She is currently 8 months now and is a super healthy and cute kid, and I love her to bits. She was born looking very similar to her father, and my husband, male 25, was a very well-behaved, quiet kid. Everyone from the in-law side tells me that he was super calm, didn't throw tantrums, always sat in the same spot, and wasn't picky about food. So when my daughter was born, my mother-in-law was expecting her to be just like that. But she isn't. She is well-behaved, but she cries, can be picky sometimes, like a normal baby. When she shows her negative traits, my mother-in-law says something. I the asshole for yelling at my mother-in-law for associating my baby's bad genes on me? My mother-in-law says something along the lines of, oh, it's probably from you, and any positive trait, she goes, just like how my son was. I've been sucking it up, but it kind of hurts. For example, when my daughter developed a habit of putting toys in her mouth, it was, all my sons never put a grain in their mouth like that. It's probably from your side of the fam. Countless little harmless comments thrown around like this, and it's been building up. Now that my daughter's 8 months old, she started to grab furniture and get up on her own, and my mother-in-law went, my son was walking at this age. You were probably a slow walker, and that's why she can't do it. Flipped out and told her she was rude, and my husband took my side.
My friend's parents are horrible with technology, and she was helping them with their iPhones at one point, and she set up Find My Friends and shared their location with her so she can track them at all times, but now vice versa, and they don't know that this is happening to them. So she keeps tabs on her parents, and on her wedding day, they were late to the rehearsal dinner, and she was really upset because when she checked their location, they were still at the hotel. And so she called her mom, and she said, why are you late? This is really important to me. I'm really upset with you. And her mom said, honey, I don't know why you're so mad. We left the hotel a long time ago. We're only 5 minutes away. And my friend was so frustrated because she knew she was being lied to, but there was no way for her to tell her mother that she knew that she was lying without telling her mother that her iPhone had been compromised. My little sister called me while I was driving, so at the end of the conversation, she said, drive safe, don't die, and for some reason, I was like, what if I did? And she said, excuse me? And I said, what if this was the last time you ever got to talk to me, and then there was a tragic accident, and that was it, what would you do? And I was fishing for some last words of some kind from her, but instead, she immediately said, oh, I would dye my hair blonde and then go on American Idol as you, I'd assume your identity, and that way, I could have a music career as you, but then I could be myself when I wanted a private life. I could be like Hannah Montana, and then when I wanted to retire, I would just go back to being me all the time. And my problem with her answer was that it was so fast. She didn't take time. She wasn't like, ooh, let me think about that and then come up with it. This was a premeditated plan. I said, what would happen if I died today? And she said, don't worry. I've already thought about how I could profit off of your potential death. And now I just I don't want to have sleepovers with her anymore.
Storytime about how my boyfriend almost ruined my relationship with my sister. So a little background information. I was 16 and I was a sophomore in high school at the time. Well, we're going to call my boyfriend Alex. And whenever Alex and I first started dating, I would literally brag to all my friends about how nice he was, about how he treated me so good. Well, fast forward a few months, him and I were still dating. And originally my sister scared him. But eventually he had been around long enough to the point where they were super cool. Well, after that, I started realizing some off things. For example, the one night he was texting me, and all of a sudden he just stopped responding. And I knew that he didn't fall asleep because he was still texting my sister. Well, that should have been the first red flag, but as we know, I am blind to seeing red flags. Anyways, I didn't want to seem jealous of my sister, so I just decided to play it cool and act normal. But him, on the other hand, part 2 of how my boyfriend almost ruined my relationship with my sister. So like I said, I decided to act normal and not be jealous. But him, on the other hand, he started finding reasons for him not to like me, and he was ignoring me. Like, he was just being very standoffish. So the one day, my sister decides to leave her phone open on the couch when she goes to the bathroom, and I had this fantastic idea to go through her phone. Rightfully so, like, sis, don't be texting my man more than me. That's weird. Well, when I looked, there was nothing. He was just being super nice to her. And with me, on the other hand, his texts were super dry. By the way, my sister and I are twins. But she starts laughing at her phone, and I'm like, what did he say? And they were just typing random letters to each other. She has a better sense of humor than that, so I knew something was off whenever she was laughing at it. And then she says, I have something to tell you, but you have to promise me you won't get mad. And then she tells me that he said that he likes her. Well, after being mad at her for a while, I realized it was his fault.
My neighbors are snitches. So yesterday I was really bored, so I just decided that I would drive around my neighborhood. So I got in my car, I was warming it up, whatever, and I see my neighbor staring at me through their window. So I'm like, is this dude really about to say something? So I just ignore him. I'm like, do whatever you want to do, I don't care. And I pull out of my driveway and I drive off. 2 seconds later, I see my neighbor's car following me. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe they're just leaving the neighborhood. Maybe they're going to the store or something. Maybe they're not even following me. So I take a left, they take a left. I take another left, they take another left. To the point where I make a whole circle and they keep following me. So I'm like, these bitches are really following me right now. So I did 2 more circles around the neighborhood, still were following me. Up until I pulled into my driveway and they sped off. I love having nosy neighbors.
Story time about my crazy alcoholic dad. So a little background information, I was not close to my dad, nor was my sister, and my mum had full custody of both of us. But one night she decided she would let us stay at our dad's house for a sleepover. We got in and everything was going well. Me and my sister at the time were younger, so we went to sleep around 11. So we went to bed and this is when it started to get weird. Legit, my dad came into the room while me and my sister were asleep and squatted on the floor saying, oh, what a pretty floor. But he was butt naked. He was freaking us out and we just assumed he was sleepwalking until he came back into the room later that night. But he had came in with our stepmom behind his back. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what he was taking. He must have been drinking or something as he began to hit her. Her nose began to bleed and she was covered in bruises from previous days. She was screaming, we were screaming, and me and my sister just held each other in fear. A few hours passed and I literally wake up with the burning sensations in my eyes. I smell something hot and puke. My dad had put hot sauce in my eyes. He was literally a junkie and my stepmom had to take us back the next day. Short and mysterious story time. So me and my sister were annoying and playing pranks on my mum and stepdad. We hid in cupboards and we changed locations making scary noises. Until eventually they found us and we admitted to it because we were just bored and we wanted to go to sleep. So like I would normally do, I went and slept with my sister because I wanted to stay in her room that night. We were just having general chit chat until we saw a man just standing there in the window. Legit, there was just a grey figure just standing there staring. We couldn't figure out his face. We didn't know if it was our parents playing pranks on us because we did it to them. But we was 11 and 12 years old. We was just so scared. So we were screaming for our parents, but of course they didn't believe us. It didn't even feel like they blinked an eye. No one responded to us. So we just assumed that it was our stepdad doing this. Until we ran into their room screaming and crying and they were legit just both there laying on the bed. They didn't believe us and when my stepdad went into our room to go check it out, there was a piece of shattered glass just laying there on the bed. And still to this day, do our parents think that we placed it there.
Story time about how my parents tried to sell me to a man who wanted to marry me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When I was born, my family had a lot of money, but my dad was into some sketchy business. When I turned 17, my parents basically lost all of their money. My dad was in debt and owed money to a lot of bad people. He owed one man $100,000. When I turned 16, I got my first boyfriend. He was really caring and our families were friends. My parents actually loved my boyfriend at the time. But when I turned 17, my parents asked me if I was okay with an arranged marriage. I told them absolutely not because I had every intention to marry my boyfriend. He and I had already agreed that we'd get married when we turned 18. Slowly, my dad started insisting that I needed to consider it. After I kept saying no, he finally decided to tell me the truth. He told me that we owed one guy $100,000 and the only way that he would let my dad off the hook was by marrying me. He even offered my parents money in exchange for my hand in marriage. I was terrified. Part two of how my parents tried to sell me off to a strange man so that he could marry me. I found out about the truth that my dad owed $100,000. He basically told me that the only way we were going to save our family was if I married this man, and that he offered my dad money in exchange for me. I mean, I was actually scared for my life because this man was known to everybody for being dangerous. I couldn't believe my mom was going along with it, but she said it was the only way that we weren't going to get our house taken away. They basically told me not to worry because I could always get a divorce from him. But of course I didn't want to marry him at all. That very night I snuck out of my house and went to my boyfriend's house. I told him everything my parents said, and he was shocked. After discussing it for a few hours, we actually decided to run away. I knew I had to go back to my house, but when I looked at my phone, I had 10 missed calls from my parents. When I got home, they were waiting for me at the gate. And guess what? The strange man was there. My parents casually introduced me to this man. And when I looked at him, he was about 20 years older than me. He looked me up and down and handed my dad a check. Part 3 of how my parents tried to sell me off to a strange man so that he could marry me. This is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. The man looked me up and down and just stared at me. He handed my dad a check. That's when I yelled out that I was gonna go pack my stuff. Quickly packed a bag and escaped through my window. Luckily, my room was on the first floor. I ran for a few blocks where my boyfriend was in his car. Once I got in, we turned off our phones and drove an hour away. Then he told me he had a surprise for me. We got to this strange house and he told me to get out. When we went inside, there was a woman waiting for us. That's when he got down on one knee and gave me a ring. He told me that he would marry me in order to save my life. Everything happened so fast and we got married. When I turned on my phone, I had 100 missed calls from my parents. I told them what happened and they begged me to come back home. When we got there, the strange man was there waiting for me. My now husband and I tell him to leave me alone. Thankfully, he ended up leaving. A few months later, my parents were debt-free. My mom sold all her jewelry and my dad sold his cars and a few other things. They should have done that from the beginning instead of trying to sell me. It's been 2 years since all that happened and I'm still married. The strange man has tried to contact me through Instagram. He offered me money once again to marry him. I told my parents and they think we should get a restraining order.